Welcome to this Year 9 webinar on Hound of the Baskervilles. Now, there are three key learning aims, three key takeaways. First of all, how to consider genre and audience and purpose when you're analysing an extract. Second of all, how to comment on the effects of language. And then finally, to think about embedding and explaining quotations. This is all for a specific assignment. How does the writer use language to describe the hound in this extract near the end of the novel? So now you're probably very aware of the roller coaster that's used for novels and for story writing, also known as the narrative arc structure. And this extract actually comes at the climax, or one of the many climaxes, but a main climax near the end of the story, a turning point where it's the height of action and height of drama. Now, this is Arthur Conan Doyle, and it's a Sherlock Holmes stories, The Hound of the Baskerville, and it's all classified under the genre, the umbrella of crime fiction. And there are four key features of crime fiction. They're location, suspects, detectives, and clues. Now, often in crime fiction, the locations intensify a sense of claustrophobia and entrapment. That means you feel you can't get out. You feel as if somehow you are trapped. And they also intensify a sense of secrecy. You don't really know the truth. You don't really know or understand the full story. The settings and the locations are really important. And this is true for this extract in The Hound of the Baskervilles near the end of the novel, where the hound is revealed. The second aspect of crime fiction is about suspects. We don't know why or who exactly is using the hound to kill, to murder, to maim, to hunt. So we have all sorts of different suspects. The motives could be greed, they could be jealousy, it could be revenge, could be hatred, or it could be money. And again, we're not really given that information at this point. Also in crime fiction, we have detectives. Now, usually they are extraordinarily clever detectives, and they have exceptional skills of observation, of deduction, of reasoning, and of courage. And we see in this extract, although the focus is on the hound, we see the courage and the quick-wittedness of the detective Sherlock Holmes and his assistant, Dr. Watson. And very often, the mystery around crime involves clues. Some clues are very subtle, and you can see some subtle clues as this hound is being described. Some are very obvious and others are false, and the false clues are called red herrings. So why on earth, and that's the most important question, the most important letter, if you like, when we're thinking about fiction and literature and English, why do they use crime genre? Why would a crime writer write crime? Well, they're looking at several things, many things, but sometimes they're looking at beast-like instincts and evil. Why are humans evil? Why do they act like beasts, like animals, rather than acting with compassion and humanity? They also look at the darker side of the human soul. Why would someone want to be that evil? They look at evil and they look at the darker side. They also contrast what someone is like from what they're known for, but what they really do. They look at the difference between the appearance of something or someone and the reality. And they also look at criminal madness, criminal insanity, and mental illness to really think, what does it mean to be insane? What does it mean to be criminally insane? So writers kind of use this genre to explore these issues, and we can see this in this extract from Hound of the Baskervilles. So let's have a look at the extract. We'll read it through together, and then we'll talk about the different aspects of the hound and what language is being used to present it. There was a thin, crisp, continuous patter from somewhere in the heart of the crawling bank. The cloud was within 50 yards to where we lay, and we glared at it, all three, uncertain what horror was about to break from the heart of it. I was at Holmes's elbow, and I glanced from an instant at his face. It was pale and exultant, and his eyes shining brightly in the moonlight. But suddenly they started forward in a rigid, fixed stare, and his lips parted in amazement. At the same instant, Inspector Lestrade gave a yell of terror and threw himself face down upon the ground. I sprang to my feet, my inert hand grasping my pistol, my mind paralysed by the dreadful shape which had sprung out upon us from the shadows of the fog. A hound it was, an enormous coal-black hound. Its eyes glowed with a smouldering glare. Its muzzle and hackles and dewlap were outlined in flickering flame. Never in the delirious dream of a disordered brain could anything more savage, more appalling, more hellish be conceived than that dark form and savage face which broke upon us out of the wall of fog. With long bounds, the huge black creature was leaping down the track, following hard upon the footsteps of our friend. So paralysed we were by the apparition that we allowed him to pass before we recovered our nerve. Then Holmes and I both fired together, and the creature gave a hideous howl that showed that one at least did hit him. I did not pause, however, but bounded onward. Far away in the path we saw Sir Henry looking back, his face white in the moonlight, his hands raised in horror, glaring helplessly at the frightening thing which was hunting him down. But that cry of pain from the hound had blown our fears to the winds. If he was vulnerable, he was mortal, and if we could wound him, we could kill him. Never have I seen a man run as Holmes ran that night. I reckoned fleet of foot, but he outpaced me as much as I outpaced the little professional. In front of us, as we flew down the track, we heard scream after scream of Sir Henry and the deep roar of the hound. I was in time to see the beast spring upon its victim, hurl him to the ground and worry at his neck. But the next instant, Holmes had emptied 5 barrels of his revolver in the creature's flank. With a last howl of agony and a vicious snap in the air, it rolled on its back, 4 feet pouring furiously, and then fell limp upon its side. I stooped, panting, and pressed my pistol to the dreadful shimmering head, but it was useless to press the trigger. The great giant hound was dead. Sir Henry lay insensible where he'd fallen. We tore away his collar, and Holmes breathed a prayer of gratitude when we saw that no sign of a wound, and that the rescue had been in time. Already our friend's eyelids shivered, and he made a feeble effort to move. Lestrade thrust his brandy flask between the baronet's teeth, and 2 frightened eyes were looking up at us. "My God," he whispered. "What was that? What in heaven's name was that?" "It's dead, whatever it is," said Holmes. "We've laid the family ghost once and forever." And that is the extract. So let's look back at how it's presenting the hound. The thin, crisp patter from somewhere in the heart of the crawling bank. Patter, patter, patter. That horrific sound is that indication that it's approaching. So it's that foreshadowing. So the onomatopoeia, patter, 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 is foreshadowing, foreboding, the terrible vision. It's building up our suspense because we are imagining the worst before we see it. And the fact that it's a crawling bank, the fact that the fog is being personified, is really, again, emphasizing that sense of terror, because, again, it's mystical and almost supernatural. It has a life of its own, and we don't know what to expect, what's going to come out of this foggy night. And then it said, I sprang to my feet, because remember, the narrative for Sherlock Holmes is told from the first person perspective. Dr. Watson is the narrator for the Sherlock Holmes stories. And he says that he saw a dreadful shape, the hound, enormous, coal black, fire from his mouth, glowing eyes, smouldering and flickering flame. So all of this language is linked with fire, coal, fire, smouldering, flickering flame. All of that shows that it is an abomination. It's diabolical, which literally means it's from the devil. It's from hell. It's truly the embodiment of evil. But also because it's flames, we've always been told never to touch fire. We know that this presence is something, it's not just morally uncomfortable, it's physically dangerous. So that's the appearance, really. But what is it doing? It's bounding, it's leaping, it's howling. So you have a sense that it's quite powerful and dangerous. It's terrifying, not just in looks, but also in action. But then it has a cry of pain. So they are encouraged. You can see here, the writer is showing that this is a mortal hound, although it appeared to be supernatural, coming from the fog, although it appeared to be diabolical with all the fire, seemingly devilish from hell, it's actually a mortal creature. So again, crime is about this creature being used by someone else to be evil. So the poor hound, the dog, isn't evil in itself. It's the embodiment of someone else's evil that's using it to cause terror and to create death. And therefore, it's using it as a tool or accessory to crime. In the last section here, we can see that this has not been stopped. You can see with these verbs, it sprang, it hurled, it's worrying, which means it's kind of gnawing and clawing at someone's throat, really trying to rip out his throat. So it's still very, very deadly and very dangerous. We can see that through those verbs. But then you can see a howl of agony. So this adverb, abstract noun, shows that it is in so much pain that it doesn't survive. And the lovely short monosyllabic sentence, the giant hound, almost monosyllabic, was dead. So they've laid it to rest. Okay, so you can see the power and the dominance of the hound, especially in its appearance, and then it's in its actions, the fact they wounded it, slowed it down, and then it's mortal, and therefore it's died. So you can see that. Here, I think the writer is really showing that although things may appear supernatural, they are in fact natural. And as I said, it's really suggesting that although it appears to be from hell, it's actually the embodiment of someone else's evil, the evil mind, that it would use an animal for its own twisted purposes and crime. Okay, so I wonder if you could tell me, how is the hound presented in this extract? If you can pause this webinar and answer that question. Okay, I hope that you would say that the hound is presented as terrifying even before we see it. We've got the patter, patter, patter in the distance. Then you've said, hopefully, you've written down, you've grabbed a piece of paper and a pen, that it is described as something devilish, diabolical. And then you always also say that it's described as something that's actually terrifying because it is leaping and bounding, but it's described as something very mortal, and you can see that it is something that has been defeated as it lies dead. Okay, well, how could you write this up into an analytical assignment, an analytical piece, an analytical paragraph? What would you do? Well, your teachers may well talk to you about point, evidence, explain, point, evidence, analysis, point, evidence, explain, link, pearl, see, all sorts of different things. And another way of saying it is what, how, and why. What is the writer showing? What's he saying about the hound? What's the writer inferring? So what's he saying, obviously, and what are the subtle hidden meanings? How does a writer do this? What quotations? What techniques? So through the use of devilish or diabolical imagery, through the use of verbs, through the use of similes. And why? Why is he doing this? What does he want us to see and think and understand and feel at this point in the novel? The why is the most important thing. It's about the effects of language. And to ensure that you use effects, here are some really useful phrases and verbs. So you could use things like suggests, implies, indicates, depicts, conveys, illustrates. And once you're using these kind of words, you know that you're really focusing on the effects of language and you're not just being descriptive. Okay, let's have a look at what it could look like in paragraphs. So I've written a paragraph to help us, well, 2 paragraphs to help us think about how you could write this up. What I'd like you to really notice is how I've used quotations. Instead of separating them out, the writer has used this quotation, thin, crisp, blah, blah, blah. This shows. I've integrated them, I've embedded them into my writing, I've sprinkled my quotations within. So this is a really effective technique that I'm using quotations alongside my sentences to embed them. So I've written something like this. At the start of the extract, the writer is using onomatopoeia coupled with personification to create a sense of terror in thin, crisp, continuous patter from somewhere in the heart of the crawling bank. The eerie, rhythmic beating of the dog's paws builds suspense as the hound emerges from the mist which engulfs them all. Readers expect the worst as the writer momentarily conceals the animal before it is sprung out of the shadows of the fog. This description emphasizes its supernatural and ghostly quality. After this, the writer uses diabolical imagery. So devilish imagery, devilish language and description, with a combination of coal black face, fire streaming from its mouth, a smouldering glare, and a coat of flickering flames. These constant references to fire emphasize the genuine threat and danger of the animal to cause physical harm. And these references also link the animal with hell, highlighting the fact that its creator is truly the embodiment of pure evil. In addition to the appearance, the hound's actions are described as powerful and threatening, shown through verbs like bounding, spring, hurl, and worry, which indicate its deadliness. The animal seems to be trained for hunting and killing. However, the creature is soon subdued, and the writer begins to depict the weakness of the hound through alliteration, hideous howl, and the noun phrase, cry of pain. These imply that once shot, the creature is quickly overcome. But despite this weakness, the metaphor, vicious snap, describes the hound's battle to stay alive once it has been shot repeatedly. The writer seems to suggest that this is a brutal opponent who is not easily defeated. And the writer could be inferring that in order to defeat evil, we must be persistent, determined, and relentless, like these skilled and trained and courageous detectives. Okay, so I hope that you've been able to see that I've been embedding my quotations in my writing, that I've been using what, what first, what, how, and why. What is it like? Well, it is terrifying. How does the writer show it? Through a rhythmic beating and onomatopoeia. Why? It's to build suspense. What is the writer showing? This ghostly supernatural quality. How is he doing it? Through the use of diabolical imagery. Why? Well, it's telling us that this is dangerous and this is demonic, and the criminal itself who used this animal is the embodiment of evil. So you can see I've tried to use how. I keep getting it wrong. I tried to use what, how, and why, and I've tried to use all of the different phrases to explain the effect. This indicates, this depicts, this implies, this suggests, this infers. Okay, so what have we looked at today? Well, we have looked at crime fiction. We've talked about the fact that locations and suspects and detectives and clues are important for crime fiction. We've looked at the fact that writers explore this idea of evil and the darker side of humanity. They look at the difference between what appears to be right there deadly and supernatural, and the reality, well, it's mortal, and looking at criminals and criminal madness. The writers, we've also looked at how we can use what, how, why, got it right that time, what, how, why, to shape our analysis, and also using embedded quotations. And we've looked at some of these phrases that are really helpful to write about the effects of language. Thank you, Year 9, for joining me in this webinar, and I hope to see you again.